Hey, Jeff Johnston here. Welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. Another great guest today, Grant Denton. I've spoken with Grant a couple of times. We attempted a podcast a while back, but had some audio technical problems. I met him in Reno, Nevada on the Living Undeterred US tour. We hit it off great. His story is amazing, like so many other advocates and passionate humans I met on the tour. So Grant, welcome to the show. And I really look forward to talking a lot about some different topics today.
Right on, brother. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. So, you know, it was about a month or so ago. We were in Reno, and I got to hear you speak and got to meet you in person. And you're kind of a living legend in that area. It seemed like everyone knew a lot about you. Sometimes I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but in your case, it seemed all good.
Well, yeah, I think, and it's interesting that where it's turned is because when I was growing up, I was born and raised in Vegas. And when I was growing up, I was from junior high up, I was the popular mess up. You know, when I was in junior high school, I got most popular in the teacher's lounge. So I was a little punk. Then when I was, I was a dick. And then when I was, I'm not
sure you've ever been called a little punk. All right.
Well, yeah, it was bad, you know, like, and I was a scared little kid. I was weighed I was real wiry and stringy, and we hung out was raised up in a bad neighborhood. Yeah. And so you had to be kind of tough. And if I'm small, of course I'm scared, but I don't want anybody bullying me. And so like, you got to be the crazy kid, you know? And, and so I was a popular mess up. Do you know what I mean? My senior year, I got biggest troublemaker in the yearbook. I just got out of juvenile hall for a strong armed robbery when I was 17. Oh, dude, like it was, but like when you're a kid in a school, like where you got to be tough, like that's like merit, you know?
Sure.
And it's
a badge of honor to wear among your peer group, you know?
Yeah. Something about handcuffs. You're like, look what I can do. Do you know what I mean? You know? And it was, I remember teachers would tell me, you know, and they were being honest and they weren't saying it to be mean. They're just like, man, you're going to end up dead or in prison. You're going to end up, and they were right. It wasn't like they were trying, and I don't think that they're trying to shoot me down. I think that they were, you know, back then I'm like, yeah, whatever, see how they're treating me, you know? Yeah, but like, I really think now that I, you know, got cleared up, you know, cleared some of the smoke a little bit. Like, I think that, they were like letting me know that like, dude, that's it. Like, if you don't figure this out, bro, you're going to end up dead or in prison. They were right, you know?
Yeah, your story resonated with me because so many people we met on this tour are doing amazing things, like what you're doing right now in Reno area, and what you're doing with your advocacy. But if you peel back the layers and go back to their childhood, or go back to, you know, college years or post-college, or sometimes jail, there's always something inside that person that triggers this passion, something that gets them motivated to turn their life around. What was that thing in your life that was your pivot point, that you realized that, hey, you know, something bad is going to happen if I stay on the bitter road?
It's interesting because I never really thought that. I already thought that, like, I knew that, like, I got into a place where I had accepted my fate. Do you know, I'm homeless. I'm an addict. I have $150, $200 a day habit, and I don't have any source of income. I don't have a job. So what do you do? So now you're committing crimes. Now you're out robbing people. Now you're doing these things. And then you go from, you know, being a homeless drug addict. The best way to describe it is to be a worm in a god, right? You're living like a worm, but you can get to a place through substance use where you feel like a god, you know, and it's control, right? Being able using is control. Yeah. It's consistent. Every time I use, I get high. Every time I drink, I get drunk, and I can control that, you know? And so it's, I had accepted my fate. And so I remember, like, I knew I was going to die, you know, I just didn't want to. And I remember wishing that something would happen. Like a kid would stumble into the street and I would have an opportunity to at least die saving someone's life or doing something admirable, somebody was robbing an old lady and I can jump in front of the bullet and take it for her. You know, like you would dream of these. I would dream of these situations where I wouldn't just die a worm. Do you know what I mean?
Gotcha. Absolutely. Because some redemption almost in a way.
Yeah. And then I got locked up. And when I got locked up, I started to read, and I was reading a bunch of things, but one of them was, I started reading about mindfulness and frequency and universal law, and whatever you put out, right, is what's going to come back. And it's right. And it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who you are, right? Whatever you, just like addiction. That's the thing about addiction. Addiction doesn't discriminate. I don't care how much money you have, what privilege you come from, what color you are, it'll get you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing about, and that's why, and it sounds weird to say it, but that's a beautiful thing about addiction, is that it doesn't care, you know, and it's
in all of us. It's inside all of us. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Gabor Mate, and he's convinced all addiction comes from childhood trauma. But he was talking about this idea that we have, that addiction is this creature out there in the corner of the room. And if you're not careful, it's going to latch itself onto your back. Like it's a separate entity. And he said, in reality, addiction is part of us. It's a process. It makes us human. I mean, there's never been a human that's not had addiction in some capacity, whether it's social media, gambling, sex, drugs, alcohol, negative TV, news, whatever it is. And he says, if we can learn to incorporate some of these things like depression, suicidal ideation, addiction, as not separate entities that we're trying to remove from ourselves, but understand that they're part of our process. They're part of our confusion with dependency and autonomy. I mean, you said you were in control when you knew you weren't, but you said you were. And that's the illusion. That's the illusion of a dependent person who thinks they're autonomous. They think they think they can make their own decisions on their own free will, but they're completely held prisoner to drugs and alcohol, whatever they're doing. But I just thought it was interesting on that separation of, and I'm trying to work on this myself whenever I go through grief. I kind of think of grief, instead of, I used to say, well, I want to repress it, I'm going to push it away. I'm just saying grief is who I am. It's part of me. I'm not going to fight it anymore. I mean, do you look at things like that?
Yeah. So and this is the reading. I had a unique opportunity because I read The Realm of Hungry Ghosts. In The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, that's Gabor. It's a brilliant book. And so I agree with him 100%. And I also I remember when I was reading in there and about about universal law and things. And I remember every night I would cry, and I would actually look forward to it, because I knew that I came to terms that I knew I earned every tear, and it opened it up so that to where, we got this idea that we're not supposed to grieve, and life is suffering,
especially men, right? Especially us men.
Yeah, oh, dude. Well, that's
substantially harder on us men in regards to showing our feelings.
Oh yeah. And there's two things you can't do at the same time. You can't protect yourself and grow. Because when you protect yourself, you're guarded and you're watching, from people coming at you. But when you grow, you're exposing your underbelly, right? And it's a dangerous, scary thing. But it's absolutely necessary, Right. But I do believe that there's, with grieving, I came to terms that it's a part of it, right? If it's, people avoid grieving, and I understand now what's helped me grow is that you have to move towards these.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think, and I don't work out as much as obviously you do, and when I do, it's in my basement. So I don't go to the gym, but I'll say this metaphorically. But, if we could look at, I ask, when I talk to people, and this is a great way to present this, is I ask people, when's the last time you ever cried, and when you were done crying, you felt worse? Or when's the last time you ever worked out and walked out of the gym and felt worse? It's like, so why can't we approach grief and trauma as we do working out, as we do, crying, and lean into it? You don't have to want it to happen, but I think this society's instruction book says to push it back, to fight against it, to cut it off and like it's a cancer and set it in the corner. And I'm like, if that was a successful strategy, we would see quality of mental health in this country improving. But the reality is all the stuff we've been doing, bits and pieces of it may work in isolated incidences, but the reality is most of it's not working. So I like what you said about leaning into it. I equate it as a mental health workout. When I feel the grief, which happened twice today already, it's about 1 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock here in Iowa, where something about my son or my wife just hit me really hard, where I just just stopped. And the old Jeff would probably try to fight it off, go into meditation mode or something. I'm like, no, now I'm just going to go on, do its thing, grief, come in there, make me cry. Yeah. But when you leave and I get on the podcast with Grant, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to 100% of the time,
Yeah. And you got to trust it. It's here for a reason. If I didn't think it was supposed to hold space somewhere, then it would be different. But I understand it now. I read something once about rituals and how different tribes or whatever and different cultures have rituals. And there's this tribe called the Baining tribe in the New Guinea forest. And what they do, their word for depression is a wambuk. And when someone gets the symptoms of depression, which is, they're kind of sleepy, they're not doing well, they're crying all the time, they're grieving, they would put them in this Awambuk hut. And they would put them there for 3 days. And the first 2 days, you're instructed to just cry it out, man. Just if you got to yell, if you got to scream, it's a little bit away from the tribe, from the rest of the huts. But it's, so you cry it out and you have a good cry and you process it and you're angry at the world and you're angry at the system. You do whatever you got to do to process it. But on the third day, they take the sacred bowl and they put water in it. And then you're instructed to direct all of your fear and all your sorrow and all your sadness and all that energy into this water. And at the end of that day, you throw the water out and it symbolizes you moving on. And then you return back to the tribe. And they say that, you're not going to not feel it again, but you've went into this ritual, and they have a ritual for it so that people don't, you'll ask somebody right now and be like, dude, what's wrong, man? Why are you so depressed? Well, my wife left me 12 years ago, or, I didn't get the job 5 years ago, and they've created this, that's like that Joe Dispenza stuff. You just hold on to things and it becomes who you are. And they've created a ritual. And I think about that all the time. When something happens where it's a setback or I'm disappointed or I thought I could do better and I didn't perform well or anything, I know it's important to process that. And I actually from this time to this time, I'm good. You know what I mean?
I love that. I absolutely love that, Grant, because in my meditation this session, I use Sam Harris's Waking Up app. I'm a big fan of Sam Harris, read all of his books. And one part during the guided meditation, he was talking about the theme of the meditation was impermanence, this idea that, nothing lasts forever, that our conversation today has a death date. I mean, at the end of the podcast, you and I are going to be done talking today. Just before I came on, I was having something to eat. That lunch ended. And it's and if we think of the best of times, my wedding, the birth of children, vacations, those all end. But the worst of times, the death of my child, death of my wife, a gambling addiction, my alcoholism, those ended too. It's and if the idea of impermanence can be somehow correlated into your day-to-day living. So in other words, this is how it helps me. So if I have a negative thought, or I have a guilt-driven thought, or I have any thought that's not productive, I know that thought will die. I don't know where the thought came from. I don't really know where they go, but I know for certain they don't last forever. And that goes with the good thoughts too. So if I get a really good email from somebody that says, "Hey, Jeff, I want to have you on the biggest podcast in the world." It's wow, I'm really excited, but I know someday when I'm on that podcast and it's over, it's going to be over. And same way with the tour. When I went around the country, the first day we got in the RV, I just sat there thinking, this is going to be over. It's going to be 95 days of a lot of work, and now here I am talking to you and it's over. Yeah. But if we can get our negative, our bad thoughts to understand that they die just as much as our good events, our good thoughts happen, I think, like you just said, keeps us in the moment. It keeps us balanced. Would you,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you agree with all that.
I do agree that, and I know that things, I mean, one of the things, nothing's static. No emotion is static. And if you can hold on to that when you get angry or whatever, I know no emotion is static, but I also know that like happy isn't static either. So I think and I tell people that I work, that come into the classes that I teach, or we do some classes for folks that are in recovery, but when they come in, you ask folks, you're like, what do you want? What kind of life do you want? I'm like, I want a happy life.
Oh, yeah. What is that?
All right. Okay.
What is that?
So yeah. And what if you're not happy? Does it mean that you're failing? Like, cause you don't have to be happy. It's great. And it's cool. But like, you need to have a meaningful life. You need to like have something to drive towards. Like that's the gig. And about being sad and that, like, if you understand, and I 100% know that it is a part of your life, and it's also a part of growth, right? Yeah. And the idea is, if you can wrap your head around this, right? Like anybody, right? The idea is that you're already a whole person. You're a whole person. Now you can stay this same person all the time and never really change and be the same person, but that's also depressing in and of itself. It is, right?
Joe Dispenza said you're dying if you're not growing.
He says that the average human has 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are from the previous day, are the same thoughts from the previous day, because we're going through the same motions. Yep. And if you're not learning and you're not growing, then you're living 90% in the past.
Yeah, that's so true.
Depressing. It's a depressing gig. And in order to reinvent yourself, let's just say, and I remember like when I went through a breakup, breakups are good ways to tell like where you're at. How can you, I'm not saying that it's a healthy gig, but any kind of break where you had a relationship and then they're gone. And what that means is like, you've actually, you lost a portion of you. You ever went through a breakup and it was a toxic breakup and you still miss the person? It's not that you miss the person. It's that you're mourning the death of the old you, and so part of growing is mourning, right? Because you're having to sacrifice a piece of you in order to be able to put a new you in there. Right. And so anytime you're sacrificing, you're mourning. And so like the idea is that like growing as a person means you're going to be mourning a little bit. It's part of the gig. You have to, you're mourning the old you that used to smoke cigarettes. You're mourning,
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. My dad used to tell us, if you're green, you grow, you're ripe, you rot. And people that follow me know I say that all the time, because when I was in the sales business for 32 years selling investments, that's kind of what financial planners do. We talked about the growth, being in the growth zone. You want to spend most of your day in the growth zone. So I had that image in my mind. If you're green, you grow. If you're ripe, you rot. So even now that I'm retired from that business and I'm in the mental health space, I'm constantly growing. I mean, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, Jeff, hey, Jeff, you're going to be in your basement running a podcast all by yourself. You're going to be going around the United States. Mostly, you're running everything in the RV with, a couple other people, but you're going to learn how to do an interview with a camera and microphones and all that. I would have said, you are insane. That I have no desire to learn. Now I'm so much more self-sufficient because I was kind of forced to grow, because I committed to do a podcast. I committed to do the tour. And one thing I found that's been beneficial for me, Grant, and get your thoughts on this, is sometimes, and I know you have attention deficit. Matter of fact, I will tell you right now, I don't meet too many people that have it more than me, but I would say you have it more than me. And God bless you, man, because I wish I had more of it. It's a best drug ever in my blood I've ever had. But now I completely forgot what I was saying. But I have found that if I have something that I really want to do, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, like Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great. If I just commit to it and then figure out how the hell I'm going to do it, it forces me to grow. It forces me to grow.
I do that every time. I recommend that people do it. Like
me too.
When I, first you start in recovery, there's a recovery portion where you get back to being we're, you know, relatively normal compared to the rest of the world. And then when you get to grow, like right when I moved out here, I signed myself up for a bodybuilding competition. Never did it before, but bought the tickets, and it was 4 months out, and they're like, dude, you better hurry, you know. And I like that.
Yep.
I like that fear, that challenge,
the
that
rush,
push.
the rush.
Yeah, and then I challenged a guy to a fight. I never boxed before, but I challenged. He's a friend of mine. Was a mentor, and he runs a nonprofit in Vegas, and he's a competitive boxer. And so I was like, "Hey, man, you want to box me, dude, for money?" And you know, we're about the same size, but he's a boxer, boxing dude. And so I challenged him, and people are like, "Dude, that's a bad idea. You don't like fight a boxer, you know." Like, you know, you should probably start boxing. But I set the fight, and I trained like I'm going to get my ass kicked. I trained like he's going to beat me, you know, and that just knowing that my mom's going to be there and nobody's whooping me in front of my mom, you know, and that it's coming will push me to train harder. And that's all and I wouldn't do anything that I don't stay out late. I don't do anything that the quantum grant wouldn't do. And a year, you know, when I set the goal that I'm going to get in the ring and I'm going to beat this guy, I'm not like, I don't do anything that the winner grant wouldn't do. I don't stay out late. I don't hang out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with. You know.
So what happened?
I won.
Did you really?
Not because I'm a good boxer. I'm still boxing. I got another fight in October in Jersey.
Really? Good for you.
Oh yeah,
man.
no, I'm set. Like I want to, because I watched the video of me and I won not because I'm a good boxer, because he outboxed me, but I won because I'm tough. You know? Right.
You gotta have that. Yep.
And my mom's in the front row. You're not knocking me out in front of my mom. Not gonna happen.
Man, I love it. That's awesome. So you're going to New Jersey and fight. When is this?
Yeah, it's in October. So next month.
I got another fight. Or live streamed or on TV or anything, or
I don't know. It's USA Boxing. We're going to be videotaping it for sure.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, the guy I'm going with, the trainer out here, is a great dude, and you know, we're both masters, and my son's boxing now too, and he's got a fight in Sacramento the week before me.
Well, let me ask you this question. It got me thinking about, you know, obviously you have a workout type physique and you look like you've really respected your body, even though you punished your body for many, many years. Where has working out been in your therapy? And for you, is it like, for some people, meditate or read a book, and maybe you do that as well. But I mean, obviously working out's a big part of your life. I mean, do you really think that's had a lot to do with where you're at today?
Absolutely. 100%. Like I'm starting a program right now where I'm taking people to the gym. I pick them up from treatment centers, and it's called GRIT, Grow, Reform, Integrate, Thrive. Pick them up from the gym. Yeah, no, I pick them up from the treatment centers. I take them to the gym. I train them. And then after we train, then we do a wellness class, geared around goals and framing and your own life. And then we do volunteering and just all kinds of, but the gym was paramount for me. Number one, when I got locked up, you know, your head clears a little bit. And I thought I was stupid, you know, like who's 30? I was 34 when I got locked up. But like, who's 34 years old, has 2 kids they haven't fathered, and doesn't have any plan for life? Like, I gotta be stupid. And I was right to a certain degree. I was stupid. And so like, I remember right when I got there, I just started working out. Like, if I'm going to be dumb, I'm going to be the best looking dumb dude out there. So, dude, I just started training and training.
I love that attitude.
Like, and I think that's what folks at the very beginning, you need to, like, what do you know that you can do? What can you do? And I'm like, well, I can do a push-up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
I love that mindset.
I started just training and training, and then I stared reading, and I'm like, okay, I can reinvent myself. And this is what I was going to talk about earlier, is I started training and reading, and then you learned that I read this book called Spark that talks about BDNF, brain-derived neuropathic factor, and it's about neuroplasticity. Yeah. Do you know how you can grow a new brain?
You can.
You don't even eat when I was a kid, they had this commercial and they fry an egg and they're like, this is your brain.
Right.
This is your brain on drugs. Yeah. And I was like, man, that's bad. And then I do a lot of drugs. And I'm like, fuck, I might be in trouble. I might be in trouble because I might have fried my brain. And so I thought that, like, number one, I'm stupid. And number one, I fried my brain. I might not be able to get it back. And then I learned that you can get it back. You can grow a new brain. You can become and it's the two things that produce this protein that, you know, that help you grow your new brain are exercise and learning. And so I was like, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to exercise and learn.
I just want to say this is so perfect for what I talk about in my presentations when my PowerPoint slide says hope and fear, because the frying the egg in the pan, that's a fear-driven method to change behavior. So we have an adolescent that we don't want them to do drugs for many, many reasons. Nor do they want to do drugs either, but they don't know it yet because they're too young. So we show them this scary picture of this, you know, egg frying, and the metaphor is at your brain. Well, how well did that do? Well, it didn't. It didn't do well at all. And matter of fact, it's all these scare tactics that we do with majority of humans, not just adolescents, aren't changing behavior out of fear because it's not genuine. It's not authentic.
No.
So, but if you can inspire, if Grant can say, you can grow a new brain, you know, you can inspire. So somebody who really doesn't understand that, some kid can say, all right, I believe you, Grant. I can grow a new brain. Here's how you do it: exercise, read, you know, stay away from toxicity, all that. That's inspiration. That's authentic. Now I feel like each day I'm working on growing my brain. And I think it's been proven time in and time out, even in my old money management career, in most even sports, that, you know, changing behavior the Bobby Knight way, you know, scaring people, isn't productive. It's not. It may win you a championship here and there, but it's not going to win. It's not going to win young adolescents to be better men and women. You know,
not at all. The answer to that back then was just say no.
Yeah,
just
that was
say
in
no.
the 80s. Yep, they came
like,
out.
Oh, is that all? Just say no. That's it. And then you know, and you end up going to you're in high school with these guys, and you're doing. I remember one time I had one of the first times I ever did meth was with this guy named Robert. And Robert was a dick. I couldn't stand him. But Robert had drugs. And we experimented and we did meth. And then years later, 12, 15 years later, I'm getting off a bus. I'm homeless. I'm dope sick. I'm addicted to heroin and meth. I'm looking, you know, we would pick up half cigarettes off the ground and smoke them.
Sure,
and I found a half cigarette, you know, and I lit it up and I smoked it. And when I looked up, there's a billboard with Robert on it. And he's selling commercial real estate. And I'm like, how is it?
Holy cow.
That this dude smokes meth with me, you know what I mean? I'm the first guy I ever, you know, did meth with. He's on a billboard, and I'm picking up cigarette butts, and it reminded me that, like, my idea was that all I had to do was just say no, you know? And then you look at these folks that were able to say no. Clearly, Robert was able to say no. What's wrong with me? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
How come I couldn't say no? And if it's not about just saying no. It's about understanding what these things are doing to us, and understanding, you know, that that we're solving problems that with this substance that we, you know, at first it's partying, then it turns into something else. Do you know what I mean?
And that's that whole confusion of autonomy with dependency and vice versa, is that kids think that they're under control. So you have, and there's a gentleman that I'm putting some work together with that I'd be happy to share with you sometime down the road, where it's focused on prehab instead of rehab. In other words, there are ways that we can identify in adolescence. There's 4 stages, actually: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's fairly predictable. It's evidence-based at Kennesaw State University with 5,000 college students, where they decreased alcohol usage almost 80% by being able to, and what's a nice thing about it, Grant, and which is I'm really excited to share to our followers, is this is driven by the adolescent. This isn't something that I come in, lecture like a scared straight type talk, or this is something that, you know, social proof is a real thing. And when you see somebody in your peer group doing something that you aspire to do, you're more likely to change your behavior coming from an equal. But if it comes from Grant to your child, or from me to my kids, or from a police officer or a teacher or a therapist, it may work temporarily. But long-term behavioral change doesn't work temporarily. It takes many, many days. And I can't remember the number. It's 20 or 30 something days in a row you have to do something before it becomes a habit. And, you know, going back to kids again, if we really want to start really moving the needle with all these issues, we've got to get kids, that 14-year-old Grant, the 15-year-old Jeff that started drinking, to understand and identify the inability for them to see the risk response patterns. In other words, the clear road that they're on, to get them to understand where they're at, what stage that they're at. And then they then themselves can self-correct, you know?
Yeah.
And you know it as a parent, and so do I, that if whatever I tell my kids, even if it's the most passionate, best halftime speech, if they're not willing to have some control in the decision making, they ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
They ain't going to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I like the idea of like the group, right? The group who it's who the group can determine like what's cool and what ain't cool,
right,
in this social bubble. And it's not, you know, they did it. What's his name? Robert Sapolsky.
Okay.
He's from Stanford. He's a he's a primatologist and a behavioralist. You heard of him?
I have heard of him. Yeah.
He did this thing with, and this, I love it. I think you know, keep this in my mind when I'm working in, you know, at the shelter or the safe camp or whatever, and we're working on the streets about like, about how you can actually change behavior, but it's up to us, right? We can change like the type, who we are, but as a group, it's up to us, and it's what we will allow and won't allow. And he did this study where they're watching these two different, they're on the savannah of Africa, the African savannah, and they're watching these two different groups of baboons. And baboons, up to that point, the guy even wrote, the baboons are just the jerks of the jungle. They're dying because of murder. They're building alliances against each other. They don't groom each other. They're just like the worst, you know, behaved, and they're just so mean to each other. And the alpha males are eating other babies, and they don't care for each other. You know, if your mom doesn't, just the worst. And somebody had wrote that's just the nature of the baboon. That's just how the baboon is. They're just, you know, they're just dicks, man. That's it. Yeah. And so one of the groups had a resort move next to it. And when the resort moved next to it, they dug a hole where they put the trash, you know, about, you know, about a quarter or so mile off. And this group of baboons found out about this trash hole and would go there instead of hunting, you know, for their food, and just eat out of this trash pit.
Why not?
The whole group.
Sure.
Yeah. And then the alpha males from this group over here, which is a few miles off this way, they found out about this. And so they would go, and it's just the alpha males, because they would have to fight their way into the trash pit.
Right.
And turns out these baboons that were eating out of this pit started to die. They're starting to die off. They're getting skinny and they're dying. And they say it's because, it was because they got tuberculosis. One of the cows that they would get the whole cows at the resort, and they would bribe the health inspector, because the cows did have tuberculosis, if they could just cut the lung out. And so they would cut the lung out, throw it out. And then these guys are eating this tuberculous lungs. And so all of the baboons from this group die, and all of the alpha males from that group die. And what does it leave? It leaves just the females and the beta males. And they started to be kind to each other. They start grooming each other. They start helping out with each other's kids. They're not murdering each other. And the guys, when they were there, they're like, well, we'll come back. And you just, you know, they're like, wow, this is crazy. These guys are actually nice. They're turning kind. The women kind of took charge, dug their heels in. And so they're like, man, this group is really being nice. This is unheard of in these baboons. And they're like, well, you give it some time. They'll turn back to the old group once some other alpha males start coming in. And they came back like 10 years later, and this group of baboons was still grooming each other. They were still being kind to each other. And what would happen, what they were paying attention, is that alpha males that were aggressive, the females would stand up to them. They'd be like, hey, not in this tree, you don't, pal. You know, and they'd tell them, like, they'd make them leave. You can come back, but when you're here, you don't behave like that. You know, and so it like changed this whole idea on how baboons were, because they stood up and says, when we're in this, you know, if you're in this group, this is how we roll. You know what I mean? This is what's cool and what ain't cool. And I think it's brilliant.
Well, yeah, you wonder how much of that is applicable to, you know, humans. Probably a lot of it. Once you remove the toxicity in any environment, it allows for the support of the positive things, you know, and especially in a community, you know, like a tribe. You know, you get kicked out of the tribe for a reason. is you're not fitting in, you know? And that's an interesting story. I have not heard that one before, but I'm sure there's lots of similar stories out there that people could use and make the same point, you know, that we need to really stand up against the bullies, stand up against the people that aren't supporting us. And again, if you try to spill that over to addiction and substance abuse, I'm sure there's a lot of parallels there.
Well, what I use that as is like in a lot of camps, the reason camps get, you know, they have such a stigma, a homeless camp has such a stigma. And the reason that homeless folks are, you know, shot is because of how, you know, 10% of the population make 90% of the noise. So, you know, not all homeless are cutting your gates and stealing your catalytic converter, but, you know, some are. And like, it's important that you like, and this is what I tell the folks that I work with on the streets. I'm like, guys, like, you have an opportunity to set the tone for what's going on. They're like, people don't like the homeless. No, they just don't like a portion of the homeless. You just you just happen to be wearing the same uniform.
And those homeless people don't like that portion either.
No, they don't. But they're, but you know, and that's it. And the reason I use that is because that's why I like that one is in the homeless and addicted population. Like they have, and I use it as an example, empower. I'm like, you guys have an opportunity now to prove, you know, in the act of setting a standard for what's cool and what ain't cool, you're also preparing yourself to move to the next social bubble. You know what I mean? Like it can't be a free for all. We can't treat each other like this. And you're not allowed to steal here. Do you know what I mean? And not that you're ever allowed to steal, but like it comes into this thing. I might be.
Well, let's go into let's talk about some of your actual projects that you're doing in your community to give back and some of the things that you're most passionate about.
Man, right now we're doing, of course we have the outreach squad that go, you know, we go out and we work with folks that are actually living on the streets. And
you say how many, is that like your nonprofit or how many people are there involved? Or?
I have 14 employees and 4 of them are on the outreach team. And then the rest are, you know, of course my assistant and then and are the Safe Camp squad. And
this is in your nonprofit, right?
Yep. This is the Karma Box Project.
Okay, the Karma Box Project. Okay.
Yeah. So we do outreach in the streets. We also have a workforce program called the River Stewards, where we grab folks that are living on the streets and we have them come help us clean up the river. And we'll give them gift cards at the end of a 4-hour day. And then we have a Safe Camp that where we grab folks that are living on the river. And the only requirement to get in the camp is that you agree to work on a housing plan. And that looks different for everybody, right? And there's no time limit. You just have to be working. You have to be moving towards something. And we have case managers and we're really, I don't want to say aggressive, but we're really assertive. Like, you know, where are you at with your plan? Where are you going? What, you know, what's the gig? You know what I'm saying? We're constantly moving, you know, in that direction. We have a 46% successful discharge rate, which is really good when it comes to
what's the community been? Have they been real supportive of this?
Oh yeah. We also like the businesses around there. We have a very good relationship with the businesses around there. Because most communities will be like, no, don't bring the homeless around. Yeah, that is
sure.
You know, that is, it makes sense. Right. But if you have a support from us, like on my street, I hire 2 people in our company that live in the camp. I hire one to be a cultural development peer, and that's who keeps our camp clean, and they kind of set the tone for what's cool and what ain't cool in our camp. That's where I use the baboon thing. I'm like, we got to, what's cool and what ain't cool here. We all got to agree on it. And then we have a street concierge that I hire to go out in front of the businesses and clean up any trash that's left over and keep our street and adjacent streets clean so that we kind of minimize damage from people being like, see what the homeless do. And sometimes we do, we make a big mess sometimes, you know, and you gotta, it's a concentrated, you know, spot with a lot of folks there. So.
One of the most impactful moments of my tour was in Delaware. And was it? Yeah, it was Delaware. And we did a place at a stop at a place called Brandywine Community I don't remember the full name, but anyway, it was a place for people who were down on their luck, addicts, alcoholics that could come in, get services, get support. And I was getting ready to speak. I was about maybe half an hour away from my talk, and the lieutenant governor, Bethany Hall, Dr. Bethany Hall, she was there to support. Obviously, she's running for office again, and there was another lady there named Dr. Sandra Gibney, who goes by Dr. G, and she is amazing. One of the most amazing. She's probably in her 70s, and she's more high strung than you and me combined. Just a little frail, just full of energy. I say frail, not a bad frail, just thin, skinny, looked like she's in shape, but she's just a go-getter. And so I'm sitting there, and she goes, "When do you talk?" And I go, "About half an hour." She goes, "Well, I got something. I got to take you real quick." So I go, "Okay, where are we going?" She goes, "Well, get in the car." So I'm going with Dr. Gibney and the mobile harm reduction RV there that does AIDS testing and HIV testing and the safe syringe exchange. She donated it. It says, Dr. G right on the back of it, And so I get in the SUV with Lieutenant Governor and Dr. G and a couple other people and my son, Ian, and we drive out about half a mile from where this facility is, and we get out. And she goes, "I'm going to take you into Tent City." And I'm like, "Okay, what's Tent City?" She goes, "That's a community out here in the woods, about 200 yards out here in the woods of homeless people." Mm-hmm. And I've never, ever been in an area like this in my life. I mean, I'm not going to be dishonest, but I try to avoid places like that when I'm out on my day-to-day, Yeah. Even as an advocate, I just don't want to go anywhere by myself like that. And they're grabbing their bags, their duffel bags, Narcan kits, fentanyl test strips, water bottles, just whatever they can. They grab like 100 bags. And we go off into the woods, single file. Now, this is the lieutenant governor with no security, no guards there, no sheriffs, no nothing. Mm-hmm. And a doctor doesn't have to be doing this. I'm sure she's got plenty of money. And it was amazing. We come around the corner and there's like 50 tents. And little fires going, just a little community. I mean, literally just a stone's throw from where we were. There was a whole tribe of people living there. Yeah. And we came in, made our announcement. "Hey, we're here. Hey, we're here. Just to let you know, we're not the police or anything." And everyone embraced us. Everyone came out of their huts. Most of them looked just, all I could think about is my son and my wife. A lot of them looked like what they looked like before they died. Mm-hmm. Just, young women, 18, 19, 16 years old there, ran away from what they ran away from. Couldn't have been any worse from where they are now, I have to think, unless they were, something really horrendous was going. And just the looks in their eyes and their faces. And I will never be the same. That really touched me. And to hand those Narcan bags and have them say thank you. And I really saw a different light on humanity. And it made me almost want to go into homeless shelters like that in the future and just say, "Can I help? Do you need any help?" It really touched me. It made me a better person. Yeah, I am. I'd be curious to know what they're planning. Have you seen my TED Talk yet? I've not, man. I feel terrible. First time I met you, I told you I was going to watch it. I will do it. I will. No, you don't need to. I will. Okay, send it to me. Yep. Yeah, I'll email it to you. And it's about help and how sometimes helping hurts. Now, it just depends. We have to have a plan when we help people. You have to have a plan. And we have groups that come out and serve food. But did we even ask if the group was hungry? Yeah. And I think if you come out and serve food every day of the week, you might even be causing a problem because now it gives them a disincentive. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying about the objective, but I think as a kind of a harm reduction newbie, I'm not into this space heavy. I've only been doing this for like 3 years for Living Undeterred. Yeah. I'm really open-minded to all alternatives, but I go back to my son who died from heroin. Yeah. Had he had the ability to test that heroin that day. Oh yeah. But he may have still done it. He may have still said, I want the heroin so bad. I don't care there's fentanyl in it. But the fact is, if he could have lived one more day, maybe that one day, the next day, tomorrow would have been the day he would have became sober and quit. We never know.
And I'm not poo-pooing them going out and giving fentanyl test strips with them. I'm not shooting that down at all. We have Narcan. My guys carry we call them shit kits. We have kits that have.
But you got to have a goal. I understand that. Yeah.
Narcan in them. I feel like it gets dangerous, but that's not the point of what we're talking about. But having Narcan out there for them, and that, because people don't recover if they're not alive.
That's what I mean. You can't save someone dead. So I can see that argument with harm reduction, but then you see the people that are adamant against it will be posting pictures of San Francisco and Portland, Oregon, and Seattle. And, for every one of those, a harm reductionist could show a story of a community that's actually decreased all the numbers. And that's the problem with this political. Yeah,
I'm a radical middle.
I'm homeless. I'm politically homeless. That's what I call myself. I'm politically homeless. I don't know where I lean because I agree on so many things on both sides of the fence.
So I think you're where I'm at. I think that it's because when you get into it, you realize that the pendulum swings. You get too far into a radical right where it's pick your self up by your bootstraps, and then in order to correct that, we overcorrect and we get too far into a complete autonomy thing, which organically, they'll manage it, where it's a hand, or it's a give everything.
We criminalize everything, every drug. We make it against the law, and we increase jail times for people selling. Yeah, it's like there's got to be a balance.
The drugs aren't the problem; it's us.
I agree, 100%.
Without me, there'd be no addiction.
There's almost no evidence other than maybe prohibition that basically shows how ridiculous the war on drugs has been. It's been a colossal failure. It's been a loss of lives. It's discriminating towards African Americans. It's discriminating towards the lesser economically benefited. It's just a horrendous way to change behavior, to take someone who's struggling with something that's not a moral failing. It's something that their body is fighting them with having to have these things, and to throw them in jail without any treatment, without any help. And then when they get out, expect them to just contribute back to society when we haven't even explained to them what's probably going to happen when you get out. You'll go right back to there's just this, and you should know you were incarcerated. So was my son, Seth. And he died within 60 days of getting out of jail. So there's obviously some failing there on a bridge to help people.
I was fortunate enough to be a product of specialty courts and a drug court. So at first I didn't have any drug charges. I just had drug related crimes, right? Gotcha. So I had burglaries, I had robberies, I had things like domestic violences, violent charges, but about all these things. I never got a dope charge. And so I never went to drug court. I would and plus I would lie when I'm in court. They'd be like, Grant, you have this. And I'm like, Your Honor, and I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke, and I would say that so that I thought that it made me look better.
Right.
But being a sober guy that does all that crazy stuff actually makes you look worse, And so I remember when I eventually told them, like, I have a problem, and that's it. And I thought I was going to prison no matter what, so I really didn't even care. Then I told them, and they gave me an opportunity to go to a rehab, and I learned it took about a year and a half for me, with a clear head and reading and learning and exercising, being away from the streets. I had to be locked up, but I had to also be in a program afterwards that held me accountable. Right. That when I was late to group, they gave me 48 hours in jail. When I was late to a counseling, if I peed dirty, they gave me I needed that. There's different avenues for different things. It's not about the drug. It's about how I behave. And so they need to address my behavior,
Absolutely.
I advocate for drug courts for specific certain folks, I've heard
so many success stories.
Oh, and then you have there's mental health court where folks man, I work with folks right now that are paranoid schizophrenic and that are also using meth and that are so sick, they need help. They'll never remedy this themselves. They'll never live in an apartment by themselves.
Right.
And it's, folks, you know, how do you get them on their meds? How do you get them back stabilized? And how do you convince a sick person that they're sick if they don't think they are? You know,
yeah, it's hard.
It's an interesting gig. I don't know if I took that in another direction.
No. That's why I love this podcast, because I don't have a script. I mean, I think talking, communicating, being vulnerable. Like when you spoke at my stop there, when you were on our panel, you know, you were just so passionate about how you feel about these things that, you know, that exudes, and it gets other people to understand that, hey, you know what, I can do that too. You know, I mean, if Grant can survive what he went through, I look at my life, I've not been in prison, you know, but I've had things happen to me, unfortunate, but why can't I do what you're doing? You know, and that's how I think we got to get, and not in an imposter syndrome type way where I'm jealous of somebody, but to basically say, you know what, Grant very easily could have really went down a worse road, and he didn't. He's here. He's motivational. He's doing all these advocacy things. He's got a nonprofit. He's employing people. Maybe my life isn't that bad either. Maybe I can turn my life around.
Yeah. Well, so, and to speak, if there's anyone listening right now that wants to advocate, one of the things that frustrates people is that it's a lot of work. You know, once you start getting in the trenches and you start moving alongside, and you're gonna work with somebody, and then they're gonna fail. They're gonna start using again, or they're just gonna leave, and you never see them again, and that's frustrating. But what's important to remember is that, and this is ask anybody that's ever been addicted to drugs or homeless or what. Like, it wasn't one thing. It's never one thing.
Right.
It's a series of things that could have happened 12 years ago. I had a guy hug me 11 years ago, and I'll never forget that. He hugged me, said, everything's going to be okay. I'll never forget that. I had somebody touch my hand when nobody would touch me. I had one guy told me, he's like, man, you just got to challenge yourself. I'll never forget these things I didn't get right. And I walked out of their lives, and they might have been frustrated thinking, oh man, wish that guy would get his shit together, you know, but but those things. So you're going to do things when you work with people, and you're just constantly trying to carry a narrative and sharing, like, you know, and it's trying to inspire people and trying to paint different pictures and showing a different perspective. Whether or not you succeed right now, you did something. Because there's things, when I wake up, when my alarm goes off and I want to push snooze, I think about, this guy's name was Sean. Think about Sean, him saying, dude, you got to challenge yourself. Yeah. And like, all right, awesome. Challenge yourself, get up. And then that one guy, and I don't even know the dude's name. I was in a meeting. I stumbled into an AA meeting. I was on the streets in Vegas, downtown. And I just, I had to drink in order to go to these meetings because I want to be funny.
You're anxious, you're nervous, and yeah,
I want people to like me. I want to be funny. I want to, you know, and so I would buy a big old thing of gum, chewing gum. I would smash a Four Loko, and I would just put about 4 or 5 gums in and go into the meetings. And I went into this meeting, and there was a guy on there, and I don't remember what the whole story was, but I remember him saying, if you want to be a good person, be a good citizen. Be a good citizen, you know? And I always thought about that. And I didn't get clean right then. I didn't start being a good citizen then. Yeah. But when it came around, and I remember reading something from, I remember reading something from, God, I can't remember his name. It's tattooed on my leg. And it says, and he told me.
It'll come back to you right when this is over.
Yeah, Anton Chekhov. Okay. Anton Chekhov. And there was a point in his life where he was going to be, where he was homeless, and he started to steer down the wrong direction. He started stealing, and he started, moving towards a life of crime. And he told himself, no more. He said, and it's quote, he said, no more bowing and apologizing to people, no more blaming and complaining, no more disorderly living or wasting time. The answer to everything is work and love. And I tattooed it on me. Labor, love. And because it's simple, it's a good formula. And I know that, and so when I transitioned, I started to remember all these things. It helps me when I work with people to know that you're not going to change somebody. Chances of you changing somebody by saying something profound are really, really slim. Chances of you changing someone by just getting them into how it's slim, you know, because they might lose it again if they don't know the skills.
Right.
If we haven't taught them, if we give them the things without teaching them how to keep them. So it's a lot of work, but you got to remember not to be frustrated. What you're doing right now, your podcast, someone's going to hear it.
Yeah.
And they're going to hear something profound you said, and it's not going to hit them till years from now. You know,
yeah. I mean,
if it's authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right, because I don't know. There's something to say about talking about these tough topics, especially mental health right now with depression, anxiety, and suicide, and all these issues that people have. The sooner I can relate to somebody's story. Now, I don't necessarily can relate to your story because I've never been in prison. I never did drugs. But somebody that you're talking to on my show is probably Grant Denton 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they want to be you now. They're like, well, shit, I want to be like him. And so by you giving back, by service, you can change lives because people can relate to your story. Now, someone, in my case, buried a child of fentanyl, lost a wife to alcohol, you know, something like that. They could say, well, there's this guy in Iowa. If he can do it, so can I. And I think you and I are just average dudes that have kind of figured out a way to help ourselves at the same time serve humanity. And I will tell you what, and I say this to everybody I speak at these presentations, and this is a neat mindset for me. People, you know, you've heard the saying, Grant, I'm sure, when you do your talks. Oh, if you help just one person, right? Yeah. What happens if you don't help anybody? What happens if there's a group of 20 people and not one of them you helped? Well, you know what? You helped yourself. You helped Grant. So my one person is always Jeff Johnston. That's my default option. So I'm 100% guaranteed that I will have that one person helped every time I open my mouth. And it may not be that person in the audience. That person's going to be me, because I get helped every single time I do a podcast. I meet someone like you. I do a presentation, and that's my mindset. So I could speak in front of 2 people. They're going to get the same effort as if I'm speaking in front of 200.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Because I get helped.
Yeah. I remember when I started doing this Rise and Grind program before, this is like right when I came out, and, you know, you visualize all these people are going to show up, and then one person shows. And,
yeah.
And like, I don't know where I read that, but exactly what you said. You go to work on that one person the same as if there's 100, and you have the same amount of energy, and you're rehearsing, you know, for the big show. You got the same energy, you're delivering the same message, and you're just, you know, it's just a one guy this time.
Dude, imagine this. I bought an RV, okay, my own money. I took all this time off this summer. My ailing dad, my pets and stuff. And we drive all the way. I won't name the city because there's a couple advocates there I really like, but it wasn't their fault. But we drive all the way across country. I don't know what it was, 18 hours in the RV. Now, we had one stop prior in South Dakota, but then that was a great stop. And we pull into a Marriott, and it's got, you know, my name up there. It's got the things ready. I had my camera guy there for our documentary. You know, and we walk into the Marriott, and there's the person helping me that was supposed to set everything up, a couple of friends that showed up. It's like 4 people. So here's this guy that just spent all this money in this RV, and it was costing us almost $380 every time to fill up the tank on the RV.
I
bet. And I didn't raise a lot of money to send off. Our kickoff did good, but I didn't raise, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I pull into this Marriott in my RV, 180 degrees, and there's 4 people in there. You know, there's 50 chairs set up. 4 people. But you know what we did? I just didn't do my presentation. I just got a microphone. I talked for like 15 minutes. I pulled up a chair, and as we talked, a few more people trickled in. I think there was like 8 people. But we went around the room like an AA meeting, and we just talked. We shared our stories. We cried. We were vulnerable. And, you know, for some odd thing, that's like the one stop that sticks in my mind, and it was the least attended stop we had on the tour.
Yeah.
Because my attitude, I just said, screw it. I'm just going to sit in a circle, and we're going to help each other. I came all the way out here. I came all the way out here, man. I'm not going to just sit in the RV and cry.
We're riding, man. I like that. I ride it till the wheels fall off. Just go. You're gonna do it anyways. Yeah, that's brilliant, man.
Listen, how can people reach you and your social media contacts, and how do people find out more about you? And then that TED Talk, when you send it to me, I'm going to make sure it gets posted on our podcast when we post this.
Absolutely. They can. My email is my name, Grant A. Denton @gmail. The Karma Box project is Karma Box project, www.karmaboxproject.org. We're working on the website. You know, we grew fast, so when we start, people do things for you for free. They donate stuff, and so I kind of need to pay for a website. But it's
you know what you're doing, man. You know what you're doing. You're building the boat while you're on the water.
It's Isn't
that a great way to live, though?
Oh, dude. I write it as it comes, and then we and you do this, and like, okay, what do we need to do that? And you do this.
I don't know. Just start making up shit as we go.
Oh, dude, and I think somebody was telling me or asking me, they're like, when you start your nonprofit, did you this and that? And I was like, I didn't ask.
No,
really do it. I just started it and started doing stuff, and kind of when people were like, oh, you need this, and then you're like, okay, then I'll get it, and then things kind of come together. It's pretty sloppy and it's kind of reckless, but I prefer to roll like that, Well,
you're living proof that attention deficit can be a beautiful thing.
Oh, my ADD works for me.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think I told you at our stop, we don't call the last D. I just say attention deficit. I know it's instinctive to say ADD, but I'm getting now to say AD, because in our bubble at Living Undeterred, we're not allowed to use the word disorder because it ain't. I understand there's a spectrum. There's really high level like you. And then there's, people that don't have it at all. And I feel really sorry for them. And it's like somewhere in between is where most people gravitate to. But listen, brother, I could talk with you forever. Really appreciate this a lot. And really look forward to collaborating with other projects. I plan on coming back to Reno on our second tour next summer. We're in the midst of getting that. So we'll be a lot more professional. We'll be bigger. We'll be stronger. We'll have a lot more advocates in our area. So we'll definitely come back to Reno and do another stop.
Looking forward to seeing you, brother.
All right, man. Best of luck with everything. You bet, Grant. Keep living undeterred, man.
Right on, brother.